Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
The number of women starting up and running new businesses is rapidly growing. More than 35% of Australian businesses are now owned by women. But why are they still facing hurdles that their male counterparts don't have to jump? From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Leela Cosgrove is the founder and CEO of Strategic Anarchy, as well as being one of Australia's leading advocates for women in business. She says that although women find it difficult to attract venture capital or credit, it's life at home that still presents their biggest challenge. Leela Cosgrove starts by describing to Jeff Waters the situation for women starting up a new business.
I think it's a really interesting time, and I think definitely over the last couple of years you've seen a mass influx. Whether it's like a business or whether people are freelancing or consulting, a lot of women have kind of moved into that space, and I think that's going to become more pronounced as time goes on, as you've got companies that are demanding people return to the office, and women particularly who, still tend to do most of the housework, most of the child raising, are disproportionately disadvantaged by working from the office. And so I think we're going to see an even bigger kind of shift over there. Look, I think it's an interesting time depending on what kind of business you're in as well and what kind of business you're looking to start up. We've actually had a drop. I was looking at some numbers the other day. We've seen some really great gains in the venture capital space for women ventures being funded. And then over the last 2 years, we've actually seen small drops, but drops backwards in terms of that, which is, look, on the one hand concerning, but at the same time, I think that the idea that not even women, but companies generally need venture capital to start up is overrated. And I think most companies are quite capable of bootstrapping their first couple of $1 million, proving their concept, and then, creating a scenario where if they do want to use venture capital to scale, they're in a very strong situation to negotiate those venture capital deals.
You mentioned a big influx. Is that just because of COVID, or are there other reasons as well?
Look, I think the thing about COVID, right, is I don't think that anything that's happened with COVID particularly is new or specifically because of COVID. I really feel like that what's happened here is that everything's sped up 10 years. It just feels like everything that was going to happen anyway, people moving out to the regions, work from home, people moving more to contracting basis, all of this stuff was starting to happen already. It just happened really quickly because of the situation that we found ourselves in. So I'd say there's multiple reasons, and I'd say while COVID sped it up, it's not just because of that. There is a freedom and flexibility. I think there's a situation for a lot of women where it's like, you know what, if I am going to be constantly held back at a corporate level, if I'm going to be paid a percentage of what my male colleagues are paid, if I'm going to be less likely to be promoted, have to fight hard for that promotion, why am I making a corporation rich when I could just be going and doing this amazing work myself and be in full control of my destiny? And I think that's kind of the bigger mindset and emotional drive behind women shifting to this way of working.
And what are the barriers that are facing them these days?
Look, it's kind of the same as it's always been. Like, women are still doing the lion's share of the housework and the child raising. And it's one thing to start a business because I think a lot of people hope it's going to give them more time, and then very quickly find out that while you might not have to be where you're supposed to be the first 2 to 3 years, particularly of business, if you want to really get it moving, they're hard. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. And so I think like that is something that is really difficult that I see a lot. Then when women actually start to be really successful, some data came out last year that was saying that when women out-earn their husbands, the chances of domestic violence rise by 28%. I wish I was surprised by that, but anecdotal evidence tells me that's the case. I've seen it happen again and again. And so I still think that for all women are looking to sort of break free of the system that they're in and create their own communities and their own systems, women are still, disproportionately disadvantaged by just the structure, basically the whole world, the structure of the way everything is.
So apart from that structure, we've had a huge increase in the proportion of new businesses that are owned by women and being started up by women, but I believe they still have a great difficulty in getting credit. How much is that of an effect?
Yeah, like it's huge. It's still really difficult, and it's crazy how often you see these women-led businesses doing amazing things and they still struggle to get, whether it's funding, whether it's credit, whether it's grants. It's still a really difficult thing to get people out. I've got to say, I've definitely seen an uptick. Governments are a lot more interested. I was speaking recently with some people from the Singapore government who are very, very focused on getting in place like a lot of education and work for female-led startups. I definitely think there's a shift. There's definitely a tidal shift that's happening towards more interest in female-led ventures, but I think we're still seeing a tiny percentage of women funded by VC. We're still seeing less than 3% of women-led ventures crack the $1 million mark in revenue. And we're still not quite getting there despite more money coming into the space, more focus on it. So, there's kind of a bigger question there, right, around what's really holding people back.
Yes, well, what is holding people back? You mentioned the structural issues, but is there anything else?
I think a lot of it's domestic, to be honest. I think like a lot of it is domestic. I think a lot of it is, and I hate to make things battle of the sexes because like it's not always helpful, but realistically, a lot of men are not supportive of their wives being hyper successful in business. And a lot of men get very, very threatened when their women start making more money or are very successful or start getting a lot of credit, and especially when you've then got children in the mix as well. I think there's still like a really big issue there with definitions around masculinity and what we talk about this a lot. So my husband is in my business with me, and this is something that we talk about a lot because we talk about, I started the business. I'm the CEO of the business. My husband is an employee in the business, came in after I'd been running it for 4 or 5 years, and people instantly want to give him the credit as though he's the CEO who makes the decisions. And bless him, he doesn't try to take credit. He's forever sitting there going, don't think I'm in charge just because I'm the dude. She makes all of the decisions. Like, I wouldn't have any idea. He's the sales director. He runs the sales department, but I run the company. And it's something we talk about a lot, is this concept of the provider myth and how men get very stuck in this idea that being a provider means making the money. And so as soon as their wives start running businesses that are making $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 a year, they start to feel at sea in terms of, like, what's my place in this relationship? And that triggers off a whole bunch of stuff as well. So I still think that the number one issue for women and for their business growth is if you don't have a supportive partner at home, and honestly, it's true the other way around too, right? Like if you're a man trying to run a business and your partner's not supportive, at the end of the day, the person that you choose to share your life with, you're going to be with a lot of the time. And if that person's not supportive of what you're trying to undertake and they're undermining you at every avenue, like it's going to become problematic really quickly.
So what could possibly be an answer to this? Some sort of public awareness campaign, or how can we work on it?
I think all of this stuff, so much of it, there's an old saying that if the issue that you're trying to fix can be fixed in your lifetime, you're probably not thinking big enough. Right? So I think we're probably talking a couple of generations to see a real shift. I certainly have a lot of hope looking at teenagers right now and the kids kind of coming through, because I think there's a lot more understanding of gender equality. Like those kids are, on the whole, every time I'm like talking to teenagers, I'm like, oh, all right, the kids are going to be all right. So we're a couple of generations away from it. But I think the reason that those kids are better is because we are seeing representation. We are seeing women in places of power. And the more that happens and the more visible that women are as being successful, when kids grow up with that, oh, my mum ran a business, or, my mum was, a member of parliament or whatever, then it's so ingrained in their brain that is the way that the world is, that nobody can really fight against it. I think a lot of the issues we have in the world right now with, kind of everything that's going on with so much stuff that's sort of anti-women, like for all it can be a lot to deal with sometimes, I'm really positive and optimistic about it. I think it's the death knells of a dying system. I think it's just like these last kind of grasping bits of people trying to hold on to their power, which is slipping away, and the world is changing. I always say, like, get a seat at the table, right? So make your money and utilize that money. I always say money buys access. So I've just come back from traveling around for a few weeks, and we spent some time at Necker Island with Richard Branson and a bunch of like very successful, like people way more successful than me, entrepreneurs and philanthropists, and getting in those rooms and getting to have a seat at that table and talk to people. It makes a real difference in terms of being able to put different viewpoints forward, talk about women's viewpoints. I come from a fairly poor background, a lower socioeconomic background, being able to bring that point of view to those tables as well. I think it's about really getting in the room, getting a seat at the table. And for me, that's like a really good reason to make a lot of money in your business or whatever, is because money buys you access. It buys you that seat at the table.
It's off topic, but I can't let it go. Why were you on an island with Richard Branson?
So once a year, Richard invites a group of people, there's normally about 30 or 40 of us, to his home, which is Necker Island. And the group that he invites, it's kind of based around philanthropic work. We went in 2016. We were invited for the first time in 2016, and we went back again this year. And so it's a 4-day leadership gathering called Disrupt for Good, where we discuss, there's quite a number of speakers who are amazing human rights activists, people who are working on the solutions for climate change, people who are, saving the Sumatran tigers, like just people who are doing really cool stuff. And they kind of come together and they talk about their projects. And then the room is full of a lot of entrepreneurs, business leaders, community leaders. And we come together to, see what assistance that we can provide. How can we help these people push their agendas further? How can we help with shipping medical supplies into the Ukraine? How can we help with, saving the Sumatran tigers? Like, what can we do to do these things?
Terrific. It's like a Davos of the do-gooding world.
It really is.
And this island, is it in the Caribbean?
It's in the British Virgin Isles. Branson's had that island for like 40 years, I think. He lives on it. That's his kind of full-time home. So, yeah. Okay,
now, back to the subject. You work a lot in this space to do with women in business. What's Leela Cosgrove been up to, and what organisations are you pushing and supporting in this space?
So I do a lot of stuff at any given time. I'm always doing 50 million things. I've been working really closely for the last couple of years with the Dell Women's Entrepreneur Network, which I really have a high opinion of what they've been doing, which is why I got involved. Because, Dell have had this organisation running, I think it's 11 or 12 years. So sort of well before the Me Too and the zeitgeist of like, let's support women, they've really been putting their money where their mouth is. And they do a lot of educational work. They do a lot of training. They bring a lot of amazing speakers together. It's just a really phenomenal free network for women in business. And so I've been working with them for the last couple of years, and we've been putting together an event. So we'll be running an event in October. We're doing a women's leadership conference in Melbourne in October, which we're really excited about, with the idea really being to bring women together for conversations. But for me, it was really important that it wasn't a scenario where we just have speakers on stage and we sit there and listen, right? Going to things like Necker really gives me this idea that I want to create real actions out of events, not just a talk fest. So particularly with the women's leadership event that we're doing, there will be like a number of panels. So 2 days, 3 panels each day. You choose the topic that you're most interested in out of those 3 panels. And then the second half of the day will have workshops led by the panel speakers where we'll actually sit down and start putting action plans together. So, we have panels around climate, for instance, and one of our speakers on that is Catherine Braysnaw, who was one of the lawyers who represented the kids who sued the Australian government, successfully overturned on appeal, but successfully sued the Australian government against climate change. So we're going to be bringing these kind of people together to have a discussion around, okay, what's next? What's next? What do we do now? How do we as business leaders, as women in positions of power in corporations, how do we come together and create real grassroots? I believe in grassroots action. I feel like that last federal election really proved it with the groundswell behind the Teal independence. A lot of my friends in the digital marketing space were involved in helping getting those women elected. And so I really believe that like grassroots movement, I'm such a working class hippie at heart. Yeah, I was a card carrying socialist when I was 17. Like I'm such a big believer in like grassroots movements. And I really think that's the ability we have with this event, is to bring together these women to talk about, screw what the governments are doing, screw what the legislation is. How do we work together to affect change?
That was Leela Cosgrove, founder and CEO of Strategic Anarchy. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.